How to get the most out of your reading. There are things you can do before, during, and after your reading session that will increase your enjoyment, your attention, and your understanding. This video is a collaboration with Ruben from To Readers It May Concern, and we made a list of questions for today's video with the hashtag ReadSmart. Today we will be answering those questions, and I hope you will gain some insights from them. Make sure, by the way, to check out his channel because he makes some brilliant content and I'm sure you will love it. Question number 1. What is your strategy to stay focused and engaged while reading? I recommend to collect inspiring passages or quotes. I have a commonplace book, but I also use a free app called Notion where I store all my information. It is there that I store all the inspiring quotes and passages that I want to hold on to. If you write them down in a notebook, you can grab your notebook from time to time and go through your favorite quotes and passages and relive the moments. You can also journal about them in a separate journal. My second tip would be to look up references to art, music, other books, and so on. If an author mentions another author, a novel, a piece of music, an artwork, look it up, use it as a moment to educate yourself. Take this moment to get to know new music compositions and new novels. So collecting information and collecting quotes is my top advice to stay focused and engaged with your reading material, and also journal about what you read also keeps your focus and keeps you engaged. If you have problems staying focused while reading, you can also set a timer so you don't have to be worried about the passage of time. When you set aside your reading time, really try to stick to it and don't let anything distract you. For me, staying engaged with my reading material means interacting with it in some kind of way by journaling about it and by collecting information. Question number 2. How does your environment influence your focus, and what can you do to optimize it? First of all, if you're reading in an environment that is loud and crowded, for example, public transport, what I do, because I use public transport almost daily to go to work, I use earplugs. So whenever I step out of the door of the office, because I work in Brussels and it's very loud and crowded, I put in my earplugs right away. I also have a headphone with me, a noise cancelling headphone, and I sometimes play some instrumental music. This helps me focus on my reading and not on other people's conversations. Also, our phones may be a cause of distraction, so put it on silent or turn off your Wi-Fi. I do this all the time because I don't want to receive any notifications while I am trying to focus on my reading. If you really feel the urge of checking your phone all the time while you are reading, put it in another room. You can also, while you're reading, keep a notebook or a piece of paper next to you, and whenever something crosses your mind that you have to remember to do later, you can just write it down and check your list later, and then you can focus on your book again. Oftentimes I sit down with my book, and when I start reading, so many thoughts are suddenly entering my head. And so it's so useful to keep a piece of paper next to you, and then whenever you think of something, you can just jot it down. Also, make sure that you are comfortable. Make sure that you're in a good position and that you have plenty of light to keep going for a long time. And also, like I said before, set a timer. Set a timer for half an hour and read without interruption for that half an hour. Our environment is, of course, a huge influence on how much we read and how well we read. So make sure you do everything in your power to optimize it. Our environment can really influence our reading experience, how well we read, how fast we read. And so these are some things you can do to improve your focus. Question number 3. What methods do you use to retain and recall information from what you have read? Keep a notebook. Keep a notebook. I'm serious. This will change everything. You can keep track of the characters, of important things to remember, plot points, quotes, you name it. If you don't like the idea of using a journal, you can also use these tiny flashcards, put them randomly between the pages, and whenever you think of something to write down, you can just grab one of those cards and jot down your thoughts. But since I started journaling about what I read, I retain so much more from the book, and it really changed so much for me. I do have videos on journaling on my channel, so make sure to check those out. You don't have to share what you have written down with the world. It could just be notes that you've written for you to just go over them after you finish the book or after a couple of months. It gives you something to go back to, and it also improves your writing skills. My third tip is to talk about it. And I know this isn't always possible, but if you can set up a buddy read with someone and talk about the book, this will make a difference in how well you will remember the story after you finish it. It makes you see things in a different way, and it gives you new insights. Once I started talking about the books with you on this channel, I felt such a difference in how well I knew the story. And my final tip is to reflect on what you read. For example, you can build in a reflective moment every time you finish a chapter, but you can also reflect on what you have read while, for example, taking a walk or doing a workout or taking a shower. Try to make this book a part of your life as much as you can while you're reading it. Now, about the journaling, I also want to mention that if you feel like journaling takes you out of the book, you can just do it at the end of your reading session. So you close the book and you journal a bit about what you've read. Sometimes it depends. Sometimes I journal after every chapter when it's a dense book and I feel like I need it. I do it after every chapter. But when it's an easier book, I usually wait until I close the book. What you can also do if you want to remember things but you don't want to write them down immediately is you can use those sticky tabs, and you can tab everything you want to remember, and then when you finish reading, you can go over your tabs and just copy everything that you need to copy into your journal. The next question is, how do you approach difficult or challenging material? My first advice would be to read chapter summaries. So you can read a chapter and then go on Wikipedia and read the summary of that chapter, going over the material again and reading about what you have just read can make a huge difference. Wikipedia often has chapter summaries, but you can also use websites like SparkNotes. Second tip, know what the book is about. So before you get started on a very difficult book, do some research. Read about the author, read about what the book is actually about, read the summary on the back. Also use the index table. Next tip, footnotes. When there are footnotes in the book, don't skip them. Look them up. Put a bookmark where the footnotes start, and you can easily flip through the novel itself and the footnotes. Now, it could happen that a certain chapter is difficult to digest, or that you have zoned out while you were reading and you don't really know or can't remember what you've read. I want to remind you that it's okay to go slow, that it's okay to reread a chapter or reread certain sections of the book. I urge you to go back to reread that chapter if you feel like you need it. Because when you don't fully understand what is going on and you go on reading, chances are high that you will be more and more confused and you will enjoy the novel less and less. This can affect your enjoyment of the story so much that you in fact end up hating it. So please do not worry about slowing down. Nobody cares how many books you have read this month. Nobody cares, I promise you. Just make sure you understand the material that you're reading and take a step back. My final advice for reading difficult books would be to listen to podcasts, to discussions, to people who have read the book and seem to know what they're talking about. You can also follow a guide and work your way through the novel using that guide. The next question: what role do note-taking and annotation play in your reading process? I love using tabs. They're not expensive at all, and I just use them to keep track of important things I want to journal about, things I want to mention here on my channel in my reviews, quotes I want to remember, and so on. I just tab them with a sticky note. I just tab them and then I can return to them later. And secondly, my journal. I don't like writing in my books, so I keep a separate journal. I feel like both the tabbing and the journaling is something that I cannot miss anymore because they elevate my reading experience. They make things easier for me. They make me remember better, and it makes my reading more active instead of 100% passive. Next question: how do you balance reading for pleasure with reading for personal or professional development? Here is my question for you. Please let me know in the comments down below. Are you reading for education or relaxation? Reading relaxes me. But as an author, I mainly read to improve myself, to improve my writing skills. And I love analyzing stories, so I realized at a certain point that I was mainly reading to learn. But luckily, I also love doing it, so it's both relaxing and educational. I do sometimes pick up a book, a biography, or a history novel that is purely for educational purposes, where I don't seek to improve myself as an author, but I seek to learn something. But when I do pick up a book that is quite dense and that has some educational purposes, I make sure to read something aside, because when, like for example, at night when I'm tired and I want to read an hour before bed, I probably won't feel like reading a dense history book. So I will pick up something lighter. I am always reading multiple books. And if you're looking to read more, I highly recommend trying reading multiple books at the same time. It actually increases the chance of me sitting down with a book. For example, let's say I have a book going on the history of France, and at noon I feel like reading, but I don't feel like reading that book. And instead I end up, I don't know, scrolling Facebook or something. While in fact, I could have picked a book that I was in the mood for. And this results in reading more because you are going to pick the book that you're really interested in at that moment. And I am at this point where I feel like reading one book is really a punishment. This idea of I have to finish this book before I pick up another one. And I'm very glad that I don't do that anymore. It is 100% okay to switch books if you feel like you're losing your interest. Now, if you're like me and your number one priority is to improve yourself as a writer, you have to stop reading as a reader and start reading as a writer. Analyze the story, analyze the characters, analyze the writing style. The next question: what is the importance of setting reading goals? I love deadlines. I love goals. It allows you to read faster and it can increase your motivation to read. It definitely works for me, but if you just hate the idea of having to read a certain number of pages a day, don't do it. When I start a book, I sometimes even decide when I want to finish a book and then calculate how many pages a day I have to read. And this is such a motivation for me, like it's something weird in my head, but it really motivates me. If you absolutely loathe that idea, don't do it. I do think that if you haven't tried it, you should definitely give it a go. Next, what are some strategies for overcoming reading slumps or a lack of motivation? Ask yourself the question, what do I want to get out of this reading session? Am I reading for entertainment, relaxation, or to gather information, or to educate myself? If you have figured this out, make sure you do anything you can to encourage it. For example, if you're reading for education, keep a pen and a notebook nearby. Keep your tabs nearby. And to come back to the previous subject, if you find deadlines motivating, give yourself a goal, give yourself a deadline. And consider reading a certain amount of pages every day. You can even make yourself a schedule. I have some additional advice that I want to mention in this video. In classic literature, you will often see that authors reference other works of other authors. I always keep a separate list of works of literature that are mentioned in my current read. For example, I read the letters of Gustave Flaubert, and he mentioned like an author every other page. A work that he loved, a work that he hated. He read so many books. And I wrote them all down on a separate list. And I intend to just go through them and try to read as many as I can. And this way you will never run out of books to read. You will have an endless TBR. And I especially love doing this with my favorite authors. For example, Victor Hugo is one of my favorite authors. I have a list dedicated to books that Victor Hugo referenced in his novels, authors that I know he loved, and I intend to read every single author on that list. Next, I also want to say that listening to biographies, reading biographies, listening to podcasts about the works that you read or your favorite authors can really improve your understanding of a certain piece of literature. And lastly, I want to say that it's great to listen to other people who have read the book, but make sure you form your own opinion first before you let others influence it. So try to resist looking up reviews while you are reading the novel or just after you finished it. You just need to gather your own thoughts first before looking into the opinion of others. If you are a booktuber, feel free to use the tag ReadSmart. We would love to see your videos. Now I want to know, what would be your advice to read smarter? Let me know in the comments and I will see you next week.